Hi, everybody. This is Molly Smith, and I'm so happy to be with you today. Happy because this was a sad day. My partner Suzanne and I went to say goodbye to Ruth Bader Ginsburg with Ed Giroux, who played Justice Scalia in our production of The Originalist, and his wife, Marika. And Justice Ginsburg was a friend. She loved the arts. She was frequently at Arena Stage. As a matter of fact, she was on most every opening night. And she's such a hero to all of us. And to see her coffin there and to realize that she's one with the ages now was just really sad and really hard. On a personal note, she married my partner, Suzanne, and I 6 years ago, before Oberbefell. And what she said at the end is, by the power vested in me in the Constitution of the United States, I now pronounce you married. So fantastic moment, standing ovation in the house at the Co-God Cradle. She was a pioneer for equal rights in America, and we will miss her powerful voice on the Supreme Court and her infinite love for the performing arts. And somehow talking about music in Washington, D.C. seems like something that she'd find fascinating, as the notorious RBG. Her love for music was legendary. Thanks for tuning into Molly's Salon. This is our weekly program every Thursday evening where I interview innovative thinkers and creative firebrands. And we're living through a critical time in American history, the COVID-19 pandemic and a vital social justice movement led by Black Lives Matter. Our guests are a variety of artists and leaders discussing new ideas, how they're coping with the coronavirus and making positive social change, as well as showing us glimmers of hope for the future. My guests this week are Natalie Hopkinson, PhD, award-winning essayist and critical cultural scholar, Elijah Jamal Balbed, EJB Productions, the JOGO Project, and Nick, the Wanda Hernandez, musician, composer, and DJ. First up is Natalie Hopkinson. She's an award-winning essayist and critical culture scholar. She's an assistant professor in the doctoral program in Howard University's Department of Communication, Culture, and Media Studies, and a fellow of the Interactivity Foundation. Her work asks questions about cultural identity, cities, post-colonial history, gender, and media, and has been published in the Huffington Post, the Washington Post, as well as several books. It's so good to see you, Natalie. And Natalie and I were just talking earlier about her love for theater, and Natalie, you as a young person did children's theater, and I would love to know what you learned when you did that.
I learned everything that was important. First of all, thank you so much, Molly, for having me on the show and for doing the show. And I was saying it was wonderful to have a rehearsal because it brought me back to my children's theater days. So I lived in Indianapolis. I lived a few places growing up, and Indianapolis was one, and the Madam C.J. Walker Theater Center was where my mom worked, and in the business office. And so we were part of the Asante Children's Theater. And I learned everything. Like, I'm naturally a shy person, and it really taught me how to assert myself, claim my space on stage, how to project, and really just sort of have courage, you know? So when I became a reporter later, I had a lot of courage to be able to approach strangers on the street and just sort of put it on, even though maybe I didn't feel that confident inside.
You know, I did children's theater too. And I think it gave me the confidence to do public speaking. It's a lot around your self-image and who you are and bringing your authentic self to whatever you do. And I can really see that in you, Natalie. So it's exciting to speak to you tonight. I'd love to just move into go-go music because I know that you are one of the greatest proponents about the cultural intersection of go-go music in Washington, D.C. And I'd love for you to talk to us about it because I think there may be some in our audience that don't know go-go music.
Sure. So go-go music is now DC's official music. It is the official music of DC as of February of this year. And I got into go-go when I was a reporter for the Washington Post. I wrote for the style section, and I wrote about, first I wrote about the arts in Prince George's County. Then I wrote about like youth culture and fell down this whole rabbit hole around go-go music. Ended up doing my PhD dissertation on go-go music, totally became obsessed. It's a cousin to hip hop. It's a blend of funk. It's actually all the Black music genres, but it's uniquely DC because it has the beat, the conga beat. It was created by Chuck Brown in the 1970s. And so like I said, it's a cousin to hip hop that just really stayed in DC and is still like sort of the lifeblood of Black Washington.
And go-go music's great. I've been lucky enough to see it a lot live a few different times. And one of the things that I love about it is the length of it.
Yes.
I mean, a lot of times the songs, they don't end.
That's right.
They just keep going like life. They don't stop. They keep going and building and then receding and then coming back. And it's so cool to see people dance to it too, because it's really got this kind of rhythm that you can dance to.
Yeah, it's like it's got Afro-Latin rhythm. So Chuck Brown, he created in the 70s, he was really competing with disco, and he wanted to have a way to keep people on the dance floor. So instead of like usual breaks that bands might have, they just kept going and going. And there's a lot of call and response, and it's, you know, really something that's communally constructed. The audience is actually part of the band. And so it's really interactive. And, you know, so we're on like 4 generations of Washingtonians that have been grooving to this beat. And so it's just really important to DC's identity. And I'm so happy that it's gotten the recognition that it's gotten in the last year.
Natalie, how did you help make that happen for go-go music to be called the official music of Washington, D.C.? I know you must have had a hand in it.
I had a little hand in it. So there was this movement called Don't Mute DC that happened last year that maybe, you know, your viewers are familiar with. There was sort of a battle over this public music on the street corner. The business had been playing he'd been playing Donald Campbell, who's in Shaw. He has a cell phone and a go-go store in Shaw. He'd been playing his music for many years, and some of the new residents, you know, really demanded that it be closed, and it just started this whole movement to push back, and 80,000 people signed a petition. There were lots of go-go shows in the streets, and got everybody's attention to know that this is important, it matters to DC.
It's so interesting to me that you're a scholar, and I'm curious about what drew you to study cultural identity in cities.
Sort of, it's really kind of trying to understand my own, you know, journey, a lot of it, you know, and just from that theater that it's Black theater that I was in, my mother worked at when I was a teenager, you know, that these issues of culture and race and identity in cities have been so much a part of my life. So it's really just kind of trying to make sense of like my life and the landscape that I'm in. And there's something about go-go in particular that really, all of the issues around history, you know, around culture, around identity, it's one of these windows that you can look at all of those things. And so I've written about other art forms too, like most of them actually, when I was at the Washington Post, but you know, this is the one that's been, you know, I guess become more of an expert in specialty in go-go.
Natalie, one last question. With the passing of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, what do you think she teaches us in terms of glimmers of hope for the future? Or what can we do to continue her legacy?
Yeah, I think that Ruth Bader Ginsburg did an amazing job, and I can only feel joy and gratitude for everything that she put it all out there. She shot every shot she had, she nailed it. First woman in the law school, or, you know, one of the first, nailed it. Like she just really embraced everything and really showed how one woman can push our society forward. And I just hope that we all take that example and we shoot, all of us shoot our shots, you know, whether it's around the election, whether it's around nailing that PTA meeting, nailing that test, you know, like we all can sort of strive for that level of excellence. And so I just try, I'm sad, of course, but I'm mostly grateful for her example.
Beautiful, Natalie. Thank you so much for coming on, and thank you for all that you do for our city culturally. We really appreciate you, and I love what you had to say about RBG, because I think you're absolutely right. And as women, we have even more of a mantle to carry on.
Yeah. Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Elijah Jamal Balbed is an award-winning saxophonist and educator, Betty Carter's Jazz Ahead graduate, and Washington, D.C. native. He's best known as a performing musician around town, having played with the likes of Cyrus Chestnut, Layla Hathaway, Eric Bennett, Dr. John, and the late, great Chuck Brown. And it's going to be interesting to talk to him about Chuck Brown. He's also performed at Arena Stage and Five Guys Named Mo and others. Hi, Elijah.
Hey, Molly.
So good to see you. So I'm curious, what was it like to work with Chuck Brown? How was he, not only as a musician, but as a human being?
Oh, man, that's a great question to start off with. Just to give you a little background, my mom grew up in D.C., and I was born at Washington Hospital Center, grew up in Silver Spring, and she grew up around just so much great music in Washington, D.C., JOGO being included, obviously, but also a great jazz scene. At one point, she managed reggae bands, so just kind of all over. And I grew up around, needless to say, a lot of great music. And but when I started playing saxophone, I was mostly playing in school and playing, you know, in concert band and jazz band. And then I ended up going to Howard University and playing in the jazz ensemble there, and still playing a lot of jazz. Jazz is like home base for me. It's what I love. I'll always love it. But while a student at Howard, I got a phone call that changed my life, which was to sub with the great godfather of go-go, Chuck Brown. I got the phone call, didn't even check my calendar. I said, yes, I can make the gig. Luckily, I was available either way. And it was great because the first time I played with him was at Blues Alley, a place that I had already performed at several times. And it's a jazz venue, and so it's just kind of like a perfect storm, perfect coming of my two different worlds. And that first gig I'll never forget because it was such a lesson, learning how to play in a horn section, learning how to solo in more of like a jazz, or sorry, in more of like a funk go-go style as opposed to in a jazz setting. But also how connected to the audience you are when you're playing go-go music. Natalie mentioned call and response. Call and response is happening throughout the entire performance, and Chuck was just like the perfect person to really facilitate that. I mean, he had such an amazing way of connecting with the audiences, and that was really important to him.
It's so fascinating. As a musician, how did you know or understand the moment you needed to come in musically? Because there feels like there's so much about go-go music that is improvisational as well. And what was it? Would Chuck turn and nod to you? I mean, here you are, a young man, and suddenly you're thrown up there with this great artist.
Yeah, it was definitely an adjustment and a great challenge, but that's something I've always loved in the music world, is the ability to improvise and step up when it comes to something like that. But I think the biggest challenge was just following all the arrangements. He had these pretty intricate arrangements of jazz standards, of sometimes like show themes, different theme songs. And like you said, knowing when to play and when not to play. When a lot of musicians first start playing go-go, they don't know when to drop out, when it should just be drums and percussion. But that's kind of more of a feeling. You have to listen to the music. You have to go to go-go's. You have to know who Backyard Band and Rare Essence and Trouble Funk, and just like I did for jazz before I started playing go-go, just listening to tons of different records and studying the music.
I'm so curious about the band because in go-go music, there are a lot of musicians on stage. How many are there?
Usually at least 8, sometimes more like 10.
When I saw it at one point, it felt like there were like 15 people out there with
Yeah.
the big horn section and
Yeah,
everything else.
they definitely vary, but go-go bands are usually a full horn section, ideally. Not all go-go bands have horns, so that's one thing that Chuck Brown kind of like kept
Oh.
very consistent in his career and his band was having a horn section, which is one of the things that linked him back to more of like the jazz influence. He started as like a jazz and blues guitar player, and I remember being backstage at a venue performing with him, and he was practicing. Sounded like he was playing like Charlie Parker lines on the guitar, and needless to say, he was.
So cool. So Washington, D.C.'s got such a great history as being a city for the arts, including theater, music, and fine arts. And there's a lot of people that don't seem to know go-go music. Why do you think this fabulous part of our city is so unknown?
That's been kind of a mystery to a lot of people. I think some would say that there's not enough go-go bands writing original music. I agree and disagree. You'll hear a lot of go-go bands playing a lot of covers, so I think, we should all kind of try to do more of an original thing, but at the same time, you do have like, again, Rare Essence recently put out a new song actually featuring Snoop Dogg. So little things like that, well, not little things, big things like that, like a collaboration with somebody like Snoop Dogg is really going to help expose the music to a greater audience.
That's so great. That's so great. And have you written a lot of new music for go-go music, Elijah?
Yeah, I'm trying. One of our songs, so I got my shirt for the JOGO
Let me
project.
see.
JOGO, that's
There you
my
go.
band. After Chuck Brown passed away, for a couple years, I still perform with the Chuck Brown legacy band, but for a couple years I didn't really know how to kind of, pay tribute to Chuck and also bring my jazz and go-go worlds together. And when I had the opportunity to, it was a residency at Strathmore. And so at the end of my residency, I debuted a band called JOGO. And fast forward to a couple years ago, we ended up being the first go-go band ever to perform in Russia. And we did that through the U.S. State Department, like a cultural diplomacy tour. And we were able to perform several of our original compositions and arrangements. One of those compositions was won Best Go-Go Song in 2018 for at the Whammies. So
Wonderful. Wonderful. Okay, so I'm really curious. How did the Russians respond to go-go music?
well, it's funny you ask. They really loved it. It was definitely like an educational experience for them because most people there had no idea what it was. And then there was like the language barrier too, but it was a really perfect way to do cultural diplomacy. It was amazing to kind of connect with a culture that we're kind of in society told to maybe think one way of, and it was proof that you can't judge any single person by one generalization.
Elijah, what do you think the future is for go-go music now that it's being called, and it is, the official music of this city?
Yeah, I think it's got a very bright future. For a while, people were kind of concerned that it might be dying, and people say the same about jazz music. But the recent series of movements that have been happening, Don't Mute DC, I think show a lot of hope. It shows that the real people, the real DC natives, still love the music, still support the music, will still come out and fight for the music if they have to. And I hope people keep fighting for the music because it's really important. It's part of DC's culture and it's not going anywhere.
I love it. And at the end of the show today, we're going to hear some go-go music for those of you who are listening to the show today that don't know it. I'm starting to look really film noirish here, aren't I? I'm getting darker and darker in the middle of it. You look good. But I'm like, woo,
Good.
I'm like a disembodied head. There's something kind of fun about that, though. Elijah, thank you so much for coming on, and thank you for all of your work musically in this city. You're part of what makes Washington, D.C. this cool city.
Thanks so much, Molly. It was a pleasure.
Thanks for coming on. Nick the Wanda Hernandez is up next, and he's a composer, a musician, DJ, and hip hop artist. And Nick has produced theme music and projects for Hot 97 FM. Oh, you're still with us, Elijah? I guess they may have a problem bringing in the Wanda. And for anybody whose name is the Wanda, you would think he would be a magician, right? Red Bull Music, Netflix. He's done DC Public Library. He did Arena Stage, Marketing for a Season, Smithsonian Associates and Words, Beats and Life Incorporated, and his work has been seen and heard at Imagination Stage, Ford's Theater, Discovery Theater, the Kennedy Center, and he was composer of Arena Stage's recent film, The 51st State. And there he is.
Hello, Molly. How are you?
I'm good. What are you doing with that album?
Man, all this talk about Chuck Brown, I had to pull out all my Chuck Brown albums. I got them all.
Show that so that people can see
don't
it.
realize the first group he was in was the Soul Searchers. So this is their album, Salt of the Earth, which is 1974, I believe.
Oh, I love it.
So this one, what people don't realize is it has a powerful song on here called Ashley's Roach Clip. And why that song is so popular, it's the foundation of a lot of hip hop songs. You wouldn't have Eric B. and Rakim, Run DMC, a whole bunch of people use the drums from the Chuck Brown song. So Chuck Brown is a hip hop.
That's so interesting. Who else did he influence, Nick?
Oh man, he influenced a lot of people. You have to realize at the time, there wasn't a lot of heavy percussion still in music as it was changing over. So people don't realize Beyonce, J-Lo, A. Marie, they all have one thing in common. They have a producer named Rich Harrison. Rich Harrison is from DC, and all of his music encompasses heavy go-go percussions. If you think of, what was Beyonce's big hit, Crazy in Love with Jay-Z. And it has very big drums, very big drum breaks, 100% influence from Chuck Brown. He's said it in interviews. So modern music today has Chuck Brown's touch on it, even if it's a regional genre of music.
I love that. I love that. And Elijah just sent us a note saying, I'm so glad that you're talking about the history of go-go music in this way. Because again, I have a feeling that a lot of people who are listening haven't experienced go-go music, but it's so much fun to be part of. Yeah, talk about it, Nick.
So much fun. You know, people don't realize, well, I always say this because I heard you say earlier that why hasn't it gotten to as popular as it should be? And I feel like every place in the United States has its own regional flavor, so to speak. Like in New Orleans, you know, you got the big brass bands, which is very popular there, but you come here, you barely hear them. So go-go, I think, is very interesting because initially it was very fast-paced. Go-go was very fast because everybody was dancing. Like you said, we was coming from the 70s and everything, so to speak. It wasn't really until 1985 where you hear the go-go you hear today, where Chuck slowed it down. He did the boom, boom. So prior to that, it was actually pretty fast. So him slowing it down caused the other go-go bands to follow suit. And now we have a beautiful, blooming genre, so to speak. And I'm not even from DC, but I know the respect for music and musicians because I'm from Baltimore, and there was always a little rift between Baltimore and DC. Never knew why.
That's what happens between cities, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That is what happens between cities. I want to dig into, we've just released a new film called The 51st State. And you, Nick, have done theater and recorded music. And I would just love for you to talk about how it was being composer for the 51st state, and what was interesting to you about it?
It was wonderful. I was familiar with your previous two pieces that Arena Stage had produced. So when I was approached to just to check out this project and see what kind of elements we could bring to it, I went and revisited the older ones. And this is my favorite story, which is I mentioned to you, Molly. I revisited the old ones and I was like, oh, maybe I can compose something a little bit more chill, a little jazz nuance, a little bit more so you can understand the dialogue that's being spoken. It's important stuff. So when you hit me with 51st State, I remember I sent you some samples and you was like, I could definitely use some more go-go hip hop. And to me, that's my favorite because I always try to hold it back a little bit. And you was like, no, that's what I want. So I definitely use that as my anchor point because, like I said, go-go is very rooted in hip hop, vice versa. So it was very easy to match the content because the content itself, hip hop, go-go can be aggressive. It can be community building. It can be all of those things. And those are the times we're going through. So when 51st State came about, I thought it was a perfect fit.
Well, and your compositions for it are absolutely spot on.
Thank you.
Somehow, because it's a film that is about Washington, D.C.'s struggle to be the 51st state, it felt like the music had to very much come in an indigenous way from who we are as DCers. And because it's also about the protests in the street and the protests for racial justice and the protests that are going on now for Breonna Taylor with this travesty that's happening. And music, go ahead. What were you going to say, Nick?
I was going to say, I agree with you 100%. Even your word choices to the T. I feel like music is that silent player sometimes, and that is how people can connect or express their voices. So a lot of times it's hard without the music.
Yeah, I think so too. Okay, so here, I'm kind of curious. It's another kind of history question. I'd like you to talk about musical theater and how hip hop or even anything in go-go has influenced what I would call the gold standard musical, like Rodgers and Hammerstein, or contemporary music like Pasek and Paul or Lin Miranda. What do they have in common? What differentiates them?
Well, what they all have in common, and that's why I don't understand a lot of people when they say they don't understand hip hop. It's prose, essentially. Even if it's musical, it's still prose. It's a way to deliver the message. Think of opera. You can even take it back to, Greek tragedy. You can take it even further back, griots in Africa. So all that to say is it's connected through a byline of just telling your story by using your voice as an instrument. I think it's really imperative that with go-go and hip hop sounds, you got the Lin-Manuel Mirandas who are able to incorporate that and now make it more commercial. Because while music theater's been around forever, I feel like hip hop music theater is still trying to grab its wings. It's still in the baby stages, even though it's been around for decades. But I feel like people now have a more open eye to it due to the Hamiltons and such. I like to give props to Psalm Ayeni 24, because his original piece, Juju Brown, was one of the first pieces I know to incorporate go-go and still talk about the city as well as other just issues that are going around, but it's still centered with the heartbeat of music. You have to remember, the first beat you ever heard was in your mother's stomach.
I love that. I love that. I'm really curious, Nick, about where you see glimmers of hope for the future. We're in such a dark and complicated time now, and a time where there's so much, not just stress, but tension, fear, whether it's the coronavirus, whether it is all the racial divisions.
Yeah.
Where are the glimmers of hope for you?
I think we're seeing it, even though it's digital, even what you're doing now, Molly, with this Molly Salon. I think coming together digitally or using technology is going to be what we need as glue in order to bring us back together. Obviously, things aren't going to be the same again, but that does not mean you can collaborate with other artists. That does not mean you can work on a 51st state or work with another band planning a show. So I think artists being home and being able to get back into the groove of living life, being with your family, slowing down for a bit. I think once we get realigned, then we can come together as a community, work together, create more art, and that art is going to create the glimmers and the hope that we need in order to continue.
I love it. Well, Nick, the Wanda Hernandez, it was a joy working with you on the 51st State. You did
Such a pleasure.
beautiful work, and it was so much fun to have you on. And I look forward to seeing you in the flesh at some point.
That would be great, Molly.
So that we could actually look eye to eye in 3D. But thank you, Nick, so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you.
Bye. My guest next week will be Derek Goldman, who's the chair of the Department of Performing Arts Director, Theater and Performance Studies Program, and the co-director of the Laboratory for Global Performance and Politics, Georgetown University. Jacqueline Lawton, who's a playwright, dramaturg, producer around access, equity, diversity, and inclusion facilitator. And Svetlana Perichuk, who's a playwright, screenwriter, filmmaker from Russia, where we will be talking about Flash Acts, which is a huge collaboration between Russian and American artists for a big festival that's happening next month that you all can tune into. I think it's a 5 or 6 day festival. So tune in for sure. It's going to be exciting. Today's gift of art is You Can't Mute Us music video. Video and song produced by Ron Moten, who's a co-founder of Don't Mute DC, based upon a true story. Performance by the Pure Elegance Band, featuring special guest Just Paul, Weensy, Jetta Freeman. Song written by Just Paul and Ron Moten. So I'm looking forward to seeing this. It is a terrific video, so watch it now.
Hey, what's up, Mo? This Don up in Central Communications, up on 7th Florida Avenue.
Hey, Don, what's up, bro?
They trying to cut my music off, brother. I've been playing the music out here for 25 years.
What? They trying to mute what?
Guys moved in, they trying to cut my music off.
We just went through this 10 years ago with Club 1919, and now they trying to close down all the black establishments, including DC Soul Food, man, at the Marineburgs, man. Me and Nat about to meet up with you, man. We gonna get this petition going, and we gonna shut them down.
Come holler at me, brother.
All right, I'm on my way, bro.
There are several black businesses that are being attacked by gentrifiers. They move in our community like they come with good intentions, and once they come in, they try to push us out.
Don't mute me, 'cause I'm so deceived. Don't mute me, my vote matters, statehood matters.
right, we can announce that this music will continue on 7 and Florida Avenues.
JOGO is the official music of Washington, D.C.
I cried earlier because this is super big. The significance of go-go for me, it took care of my family.
Go-go music is part of the city and will continue to be part of the city for generations to come.
To the godfather of go-go music. He's not here today, but he's looking down at us, saying we got it right.
Sun down.